Hello, my name is Dr. Provost of the Chemistry and Biochemistry Department here at the University of San Diego. We're going to talk about the care and feeding of your rotors. These are very expensive rotors coming from anywhere from a few $1,000s to $15,000 or $20,000 each. So it's very important that we take care of these, have good stewardship so that all students, faculty from all of our departments are able to share and properly, safely use our centrifuge equipment. All right. So looking again at our centrifuges here, whether it's a Fiberlite, where you can see it's a Kevlar fiber material, composite material, so it's lightweight and durable, or if it's a metal centrifuge like this Sorval S34 head, they all come with the same way to install it. So let's start over here. So here with the Fiberlite F21, we have the top for the head, and if you notice there's two screws, there's two sets of screws. The first thing you want to make sure is that these are lubricated. So we routinely have somebody take some thread, screw, lubricant, and lubricate these as well as the inserts where they go. If you look at the top of this, you can see each one of these screws are controlled by one of two different knobs. The inside thread is for screwing the centrifuge to our centrifuge head to the centrifuge. The outside screw is to screw the top securely onto the centrifuge itself, or the centrifuge head. And so you would screw this using this to hit the small inside screw, and this to turn the threaded to seat it the top onto the rotor. All right. So let's take a look at one other thing. It's also very important as I think about it to not force anything. Use light pressure on any of this, because these threads can these screws and threads will easily cross thread, ruining the whole top or the centrifuge itself, and it's very difficult and may actually be impossible, depending upon how damaged it is, to repair that. And it certainly is going to be very costly. So if we look up any of these centrifuges and take a look at it, right at the bottom, you can see two pins. There are two silver pins in there. You may have to back up a little bit. Okay, so if you look very carefully, there's two pins. Now if we go over to the centrifuge, we can see here on the spindle there are two other pins, one here and one here. By the way, this is also lubricated and taken care of by our staff here at USD. And so it's important that these two pins do not sit on top of the pins there. So what happens is the pins on the spindle need to sit next to, but not on top of, those pins. So that way when the centrifuge rotor or the spindle turns, it catches those pins and helps keep it moving with the spindle. If you happen to put the two pins on top of each other, that spindle will start to spin, these will drop, and you'll snap or bend those pins, causing a significant damage to the rotor and the centrifuge. So the way that I like to use this is, for each case, before I install the rotor, I take a look at where those two pins are, put my hands on each side, look into the centrifuge and find out where those pins are, and make sure that my hands are not aligned with the pins. Doing that is enough to make sure that it's on there, make sure it's firmly seated, and the centrifuge head is ready to be placed onto the tube. Alright, so then the easiest way, once you've balanced everything out and you have all your tubes balanced across from the middle of the centrifuge, so these two tubes have to be balanced, these two tubes have to be balanced, but this set does not have to be balanced with this set. But they do have to be balanced across from each other. You can't divide this in half and say these four have to be balanced with these four, but not exactly across. That would cause an angular momentum, cause this to start spinning and at an angle, and then break the spindle, the motor, and possibly damage, cause human damage, as it could potentially spin free. So what you want to do is fit the top of the centrifuge rotor to the centrifuge by using this thread. Then when that's on, then you want to use the small threaded screw to fix the centrifuge to the rotor. So to start with, it says close in both cases to fasten to the centrifuge, and to close it gives you the arrows. So what I like to do is I like to hold this up a little bit so that way you're not having both screws spin at the same time. And simply, very lightweight, I'm not putting very much pressure at all on this. So I'm holding this up just to make sure that this doesn't turn while I'm turning the wider screw, and I'm tightening it down to a little bit past finger tight. It didn't take any pressure to put it on there, and now you can see that the top is fixed to the rotor. Now I'm going to fasten the centrifuge to the spindle itself. It's important you do the large one first, then the second one, so that way you don't have a misalignment of these screws. When it comes time that your centrifugation is done, you'll do them in the reverse order. Remove the inner screw tie holding the rotor to the centrifuge spindle, then loosen the top. Again, I'm not using very much pressure, and I like to hold up this inner screws so that way if they both turn, they're not going cross-threading or fighting against each other. So again, when putting it on, I hold the inner one, screw in the top with the bigger thread until it's just about a little past finger tight, and then screw in the next one. And you can see that it's fixed to the rotor. Now let's talk about cleaning these rotors when you're all done. Each time when you're done with this, make sure that the centrifuge itself is clean. If there's ice buildup on there, shut down the centrifuge, let it warm up, and then use paper toweling and soap and water if something is spilled in there. Each time you use the centrifuge, even if you didn't spill any, it's good practice to use simple soap and water to rinse out and wipe down the inside of your centrifuge head. You can see this centrifuge head right here, and this tube right here has got some residue. Somebody didn't realize that a little bit of water eventually dried down and created that. That will cause small chips, cracks, and a breakdown of the rotor. While it is a fiber light, it still starts to degrade the rotor, and eventually we won't be able to spin it at the same speed, or eventually to the same at all if you're not careful. So this centrifuge needs to be washed out. To do that, simply use the soap that's provided. Very carefully use these brushes. There's metal tips here. You want to avoid using these tips if at all possible, so that way you're only using the brushes on the bottom. You don't want to use these metal components to scratch the sides or the bottoms of this. So a simple brush and a sponge will be all you need to make sure it's all clean. When you're done with the centrifuge, it's wet, rinse it well, rinse it with the deionized water, and then place the centrifuge upside down to dry. If it's flush like this, it'll be a little bit harder, so sometimes I'll put a small microfuge tube or something so it's tilted so it's easier to dry. Again, make sure that each one of these heads, which are very expensive, are clean and well taken care of. When you're done with them, they'll last a long time. Thank you very much.